How's it going, everyone? Got quite a lot to talk about in this video. A bit of an update on Stellar Blade. There's been a lot of Stellar Blade news and notes that have come out over the last few months that have really just been buried in a bunch of interviews. It's not like any particular element got spotlighted, but I do want to highlight one of those said elements that really stood out to me, especially when we saw that release date reveal trailer that I will just go back to it, and I will constantly say that that is how a trailer is done correctly. And given that we live in an era that I feel like game promotion is so bad, I need to give Stellar Blade all the credit in the world, just because if by the off chance that a developer or somebody in PR or whatever the case may be watches this video or watches one of those videos, I can constantly gush about it, and maybe it would get back to the right ear. I don't know. I doubt that'll happen, but it's a chance for me to gush. Now, before we get into this video, I just want to ask you guys, please like this video and do leave a comment with your thoughts. It really does help out the channel a lot, and it is much appreciated. In an interview, it was asked, music seems really important to Stellar Blade. Can you talk about how you decided on the songs and what we can expect from the soundtrack? If you watch that trailer that I referenced in the beginning of the video, I think the sound design and the sound direction and the soundtrack was one of the key elements of making that trailer awesome. You need a good soundtrack when it comes to a stylistic action game. I feel like that is so important. Stylistic action games and like JRPGs, those games need to have good soundtracks, and in the case of Stellar Blade, it really seems like it has a great soundtrack. It was noted that music is an important element in the game that really portrays the worldview of Stellar Blade. We have about 100 tracks on the soundtrack, and most songs have a kind of chorus or some kind of human voice in them. I love that. I love when songs have lyrics attached to them. I feel like it works really well in an action game as well, especially something super stylish as Stellar Blade is. I feel like you need that little bit of elegance to the game, and obviously you can do elegant soundtracks without human voice or lyrics or anything like that and just make it, you know, just instrumental. But I think, you know, having the human voices and having some kind of chorus does add a little bit of oomph to it. Around 60% of the songs were created in-house, while the other 40% were created by a sound studio called Monica, led by composer Keiichi Okabe. Okabe-san was the composer of Nier. So obviously, Nier was also a game that had a nice little soundtrack, to say the least. So it's pretty exciting, all things considered, and I think from a sound design standpoint, a lot of reason to be excited for Stellar Blade. Now, Stellar Blade is one of those games that, as a new IP, I think is going to do exceedingly well. The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about is the $70 price tag. I don't know if people will look at Stellar Blade and be like, oh, this is just a 15 to 20 hour action game. Is $70 really worth it? But I feel like Stellar Blade is really gonna click, and I don't think it's just because they have an attractive main character in the game, guys. I think there's a lot of video games that have attractive main characters that don't do all too well. Let's just be honest here. I think Stellar Blade does have more going for it, where the actual gameplay, the soundtrack, and those surrounding elements do look really great. And that's really what's gonna put this game over more than anything else. You can't get away with a $70 price tag by just having an attractive main character. Sure, it helps from a promotional standpoint, but I think we're giving Mankind too little credit if they're getting duped for $70 by, you know, just an attractive main character. And sure, that'll happen every now and again, and that'll happen to a small portion of people, but you're talking about a game that's aiming to sell millions upon millions of copies. I think it needs to be a good game to justify that. And the thing is, we are living in an era where it is super hard, and I've mentioned this over and over again, and I think a lot of you guys have noticed it as well, but for a smaller studio to drop a new IP and it resonate to a high level, very difficult. We've seen game after game, new IPs coming from a lesser known studio, not a smaller studio, lesser known studio is what I should say, that have just flopped. Look at Immortals of Aveum, look at Callisto Protocol, look at Forspoken. I know Luminous Productions isn't necessarily that lesser known, but they're kind of lesser known, and all those games were flops, all those games were $70, and it is very hard to pop off with that added layer of it being a lesser known studio as well as it being a new IP. Really, there aren't that many games, and also games that are big budget, $70 titles. Like, it's few and far between that these games are popping off. We just had Skull and Bones flop as well, and that's obviously coming from Ubisoft. They're a little bit more well known, to say the least, but Skull and Bones flopped as well. Now, Skull and Bones flopped for a lot of other reasons, and that was a live servicey game, but nonetheless, you've been seeing flop after flop after flop, and I don't think Stellar Blade is gonna be a flop. I actually think this game is gonna gonna do fairly well commercially. Now, obviously, expectations in line, it's not gonna sell like the 10 plus million copies that a Spider-Man 2 or a God of War Ragnarok sells, at least not right off the bat, I don't think. Maybe once it ultimately comes out on PC, that'll add a surge of sales, and I could definitely see it selling in the healthy multi-million copy range. Like, if it sells 2 to 3 million copies, that's an incredibly successful number, and I'm talking 2 to 3 million copies over a significant time period, not like, first 24 hours or anything like that. But for a game of a new IP, and again, coming from Shift Up, and Shift Up initially designed Stellar Blade as a smaller title. It was a small game before Shuhei Yoshida played the entire prototype and had PlayStation partner with Shift Up, so even though this is more of a second-party game, I could see there being a relationship formed with a Sony, PlayStation, and Shift Up, and if Stellar Blade does well, you think they're not going to want to monetize Eve as a mascot for PlayStation? You think they're not going to want to do follow-up titles? Look, I'll say what I say. An attractive main character is not going to get you to where you want to be in terms of selling multi-million copies and whatnot, but in terms of being a promotable mascot, bro, Eve can be a promotable mascot for PlayStation as long as, you know, the first foray, Stellar Blade, turns out to be pretty good. And obviously, I'm pushing the cart before the horse a little bit, but Sony needs new IPs that it can latch onto and new studios that hopefully can pop off. I'm not saying that at some point they gotta acquire Shift Up, but Shift Up can act as a quality second-party studio, especially because you had so many studios like a Naughty Dog, Insomniac to an extent. Now, Insomniac puts out a lot of games, but they spent a lot of time, I would imagine, working on that multiplayer Spider-Man project. Naughty Dog spent a lot of time working on Last of Us Factions. That when you do have these second-party studios and you have these partnerships forming with a Team Ninja and a Shift Up, you're getting titles like a Rise of the Ronin and a Stellar Blade to at least mitigate the lack of actual first-party titles, because we know first-party, it's effing barren this year. It's absolutely terrible. So when you have a Stellar Blade and you have a Rise of Ronin, and these are games that look quite good. Rise of Ronin, I don't know how it's gonna turn out. I hope it turns out well. Team Ninja's incredibly talented, but Stellar Blade, I think is a game that's right up the alley of the PlayStation audience. A big budget single player action RPG, and if it turns out well, I could see this being an IP that Sony can latch onto. I'm not saying it'll be a Horizon or a God of War to that extent, but I could see it developing into something Sony can lean on into a little bit and invest into it as an IP. And as I say that, again, me pushing the cart before the horse a little bit, watch it be a one and done kind of game with a finality to its story after completion, but we'll see. It ultimately is going to depend on how this game does commercially, but for a new IP, for a studio that's lesser known, I'm sensing all of the right things in terms of this game popping off to an extent. And again, when we talk about lesser known studios doing a new single player, big budget IP, one of the only ones that I can think of that has really popped off over the last few years is Plague Tale Innocence and a Plague Tale Requiem, of course. That became a franchise, and hopefully we see that with Stellar Blade as well, becoming a big franchise for Sony and PlayStation going forward. And then once it's released on PC as well, I do think that's going to jolt up sales quite a bit, even though the PC audience will be absolutely fiendish when it comes to the modding scene for this game. But that'll do it for me. Again, I think from a soundtrack standpoint, this game is going to have a killer soundtrack, especially given that a significant amount of it is coming from the composer of Nier. And if you've never played Nier, I mean, just go look up the soundtrack to a Nier Replicant or a Nier Automata. Those games have tremendous soundtracks. So that'll do it for me. Let me know all of your thoughts in the comment section down below. Sound off there. Thank you for watching, and goodbye. Hey guys, we hope you enjoyed the video, and if you did, make sure to hit the subscribe button, and if you're already subscribed, do us a favor and hit the bell icon. This way you'll be notified whenever we post a new video. That's the best way to keep up with all of our uploads, and we usually try to upload 2 videos a day. And with the bell icon hit, you'll be notified whenever we do upload a video. As always, thanks for watching.